and welcome to Food for Life this week. I'm your host, Ashley Treslane, and it is a great show. I can't wait to introduce my guests, but we're celebrating this week. It's our 1-year anniversary. It's been a year since we started Food for Life, and I thank you all that have stuck with us and have been with us and watching all my guests. And I thank you for that. I am so excited that we even made it to this mark. I didn't even think I would. So you can see how excited I get about things. I am just so grateful for all of you. Now, for those of you that are joining us on our 1-year celebration, I am Ashley Treslane. I am your host. I own a company called Bella Foodie here in New England. I am a personal chef and I'm a food educator, along with a bunch of other stuff mixed in. But mostly I just love food and I love sharing people's stories and see how it fits into their life. With that said, our guest this week is the Allergy Chef, and she's going to come on and share our stories after these messages. And we are back. Welcome, Kathlena, the Allergy Chef. We are so excited to hear your story today. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to share it with you.
We were talking so much before this started that we almost forgot to go live to share everything with everyone.
Yeah, I have that effect on people. We just start chit-chatting, and the next thing you know, it's been like 20 minutes, and usually we're like, oh, you know what? We should have recorded all of that. That was so good.
Well, that's okay. We're recording everything now. Everything's live and streaming to places. I do want to note, for those of you that usually watch on Facebook, Facebook was being like really grumpy this week, and they did not want to attach to my usual streaming service. So we will put the replay up for those of you that like to watch on Facebook. Now, Kathlena, do you want to share with everyone who you are and what you do?
So I'm Kathlena, the Allergy Chef. What I do is I change the world one bite at a time. That's my mission. It's to really help people find safe and delicious food to eat, help them understand that it doesn't matter what your dietary restriction is, that there are options for you. All too often people, they get a diagnosis or they learn that they have to avoid a certain food and they feel like it's the end of the world, and it's not. You know, I personally have more than 200 food allergies and food intolerances. I can't drink most water. I have contact and airborne allergies. I have a respirator that I have to wear most times just to leave the house. Trust me, there's safe and delicious food to be found. And I want to show people that. And in a weird way, I just want to prove the world wrong. You know, the world tells us, oh, you can't have such and such that's also gluten-free and free from this and free from these other things and tastes good. And I'm like, yeah, no, we can. You know, started a bakery, been there, done that, proved you wrong. Like, that's my thing, right? It's showing the world, like, we can have our cake and eat it too. It requires elbow grease and creativity, but we can absolutely have what the other side has. I think the only thing we can't really have is like egg-free souffle. That's like the one thing.
Yeah, I haven't figured that one out. I'm a big fan of gluten-free baking because I'm gluten-free. At least I am at the moment, and I have been for the last few years because it's been better for my MS, like in the inflammation in my body. And I do love gluten-free baking, but it's a little bit different, right? Like gluten-free baking is a little, you got to get a little more creative, and especially if you're not using eggs because somebody's like vegan or something else, you got to get a little more creative.
We should talk about that today. We should, like, I know you want to talk story, but I also feel like we've got to give people some tips.
About being creative in the kitchen.
Yeah. Okay.
So you have over 200 allergies. Is that what you said? I don't think I realized it was that many. So when did your difficulties really start?
I mean, I've had difficulties my entire life. I guess the real question is when was I diagnosed? And I would say like maybe 10, 12 years ago was the start of the diagnosis process. And the process itself took about maybe 9 to 12 months, just from going from like, finding someone who was willing to say, hey, there's something really wrong with you. And who wasn't so full of himself that they could say, I don't know what it is. And we're going to figure it out together. Right. Because so many practitioners want to have like this God complex and they think they know it all. But they don't. I can tell you that for sure. Um, and then post diagnosis, just finding actual safe food to eat, that was actually the hardest part because I have a severe corn allergy. Corn has more than 250 names and uses in food, medicine, and agriculture. It's in
Mhm.
everyday stuff, including gasoline, adhesives, even like, those ball canning reusable jars? The lining on the top of the jar is usually contaminated with corn, which is why when we buy them, we actually flip them over and we don't actually can with them. We just use them for like freezer storage. But corn is everywhere. So finding food that's free from corn, truly, that was the most difficult part of the journey, if I had to pick one. Um,
I had no idea that they use them on ball jars because I love my canning jar. I use them for storage. I use them for everything, and I had no idea. And I'm sensitive to corn, but I don't have like a horrible allergy. I know it's in vitamins and stuff too, like
oh,
I
yeah, for sure.
in supplements and things, but those aren't regulated.
No. Well, but it's in a lot of stuff that is regulated too, right? Like, for example, if you look at an extract and it just says alcohol, that usually means grain alcohol derived from corn, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you see things like citric acid, most people see citric and think citrus, but citric acid, 95% of the time, is derived from corn. You see weird things on your labels such as EDTA or glycerin, etc., derived from corn. Now, is it always derived from corn?
Mm-mm.
Up until like maybe 3 or 4 years ago, pretty much solid yes. Nowadays, we're seeing a little more diversity. We're seeing more derivatives of tapioca and sunflower and other things. So, for those who are allergic to other things besides corn, they're having to start to make a lot more calls now, especially like with a sunflower allergy. That's actually one of the hardest ones to live with as well, because what a lot of people don't know is that sunflower is a processing aid on the equipment itself in a lot of manufacturing facilities for food. And it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
have to be disclosed on the label. The only way to find out is to call and ask.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So you spent better part of your life just not knowing what was wrong with you or how to get help. And I understand this about seeing doctors. I spent years seeing doctors before they diagnosed me, and they just kind of wrote me off as a teenager that didn't know and saw some stuff in my medical history that they just were like, oh, she's fine, it's in her head, and that was it. And I was like, no, there's something really wrong with me, people. And it took 3 years for them to really figure out what was wrong with me.
Yeah, I can relate to that. When I was a teenager, I went on a trip and I got really sick after eating a meal. And it was after oral surgery. So I couldn't eat much. And then they served this meal that was like rich in gluten and dairy. And I essentially had like a mild seizure for 36 hours. And so they were like ready to divert the plane and everything. It was like a big deal. We land and every single medical professional was like, what happened? What happened? I just kept telling them the same thing. I ate the food. I got sick. I ate the food. I got sick. They ran every single test on me except for a food allergy test. And it wasn't like the word allergy was a stranger to my chart because they already knew I had environmental allergies. I was severely allergic to grass. Like grass could not even touch my skin.
Mm-hmm.
But not a single specialist said food allergy test. I mean, it was like, what's wrong? I ate the food, I got sick. Okay, cool. We're going to do a heart scan. What's wrong? I ate the food, I got sick. Cool. We're going to take you in for an MRI. Like, I ate the food, I got sick. Why all these smart people couldn't make the connection is beyond me.
Were you brought into an ER?
Um, yes, I want to say I started off in an ER and then got moved around and then had to go in for a bunch of follow-up appointments afterwards.
Usually in an ER, because I had a few trips to the ER myself when I was first sick. They only know the scope of so far and they only check for certain things. And most of these people are not educated on, oh, food is something we need to think of. Unless you got food poisoning, they never think to go any further than that.
I mean, I'd like to think that it's gotten better. I mean, well, at least if you present with traditional anaphylaxis, they think food. But if you're
Mhm.
like me and you're a very non-traditional case, you slip through the cracks really fast.
So none of your symptoms are traditional to these allergies, or are they just some?
Um, I would say so. I've experienced anaphylaxis a couple of times, but I am mostly a non-traditional case. There are traditional elements, but if you were to look at the case as a whole, you'd probably say the case is like 85% non-traditional.
Now, have you had like the doctors you have now? Have you tried like holistic stuff too?
So I've done East and West, and I pretty much reached a point on my own journey where I just walked away from all medical people. It actually happened several years ago because so I order a lot of my own tests and do a lot of my own stuff, but
Mhm.
I went in to request something that I couldn't order on my own, and the specialist took a look at my case, listened to me for a little bit, and she says, "You don't need this." She says, "I get why you want to order it, but you don't need this test. You've already figured everything out. You're managing it. You don't need to do this." And I was like, "Oh, okay. Thanks. Bye." I mean, it was a really polite dismissal. And for me, that was kind of the end of my use of like East or West medicine because it was like, I mean, when you've got a specialist who specializes in part of what's wrong with me saying, "You've already figured it out," like, what more do you need at that point?
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of had a mix of the East and West. I do have a neurologist, obviously, because I have to, but I use some more holistic treatments, and the way that I eat, I use that as part of my medical journey, as part of how I heal myself and how to help me along the way. Whereas I know for you, you enjoy more cooking for people because some of the stuff you can't do, right? You still can't eat things.
Yeah, no, I can't eat 99% of what I make. No, I think, for me at least, I'm a big believer in the 5 pillars of health. It's like this own little thing that I came up with one day. I was like, these are the
Yeah.
5 pillars, right? It's air, water, food, movement, and medicine. And medicine can be a form of supplements, pharmaceuticals, over the counter, vaccine, anything you inject or put on yourself or in yourself, right? So just medicine as a whole. When we look at those 5 pillars, for most people, if we address all 5, you see radical healing, right? But you've got to be willing to put in the work. I have learned the hard way. I used to think that I could help so many people, right? Once I knew like how far along I was and, because I mimic so many illnesses as well. So it's like I had been in the shoes of so many people and I'm like, I could help so many people, right? Come to find out, most people aren't willing to put in the work. I had to learn that the hard way. And I was like, oh, oh, it was almost like disheartening, right? Because you realize, like, say there's a million, like, I'll just make up a number, like a million sick people. Of that million, 30% are willing to do the work. And of that 30%, most will give up before they get even to the halfway mark, right?
I know so many people. This is awful. I know people that know that certain foods will make them sick or it'll like upset some sort of condition. And they're like, yeah, but it's worth it if I have it or I do. I'm like, you know that you're genuinely going to be sick in like an hour, but you just won't bother not eating it. Like for me, I'm like, I do everything I can not to eat the things I'm allergic to so I don't get sick. I'm like, why would you do that to yourself? Like, you know what's going to happen to you, but you're okay with that.
I often question that as well because you know there's going to be a domino effect, right? Continued
Mhm.
exposures to these foods, it's like the body is screaming at you, don't. And then if you keep doing it, the body's going to change and do something else, and we don't want that. We want to provide support for the body so that it can heal itself. I mean, the human body is designed to heal, right? Think about a paper
Mhm.
cut. We are designed to heal innately. We just need to support ourselves and give ourselves, the tools to do it.
It's so true. So I mean, I know you and I we've taken control of our health. We found ways to help ourselves. And not everyone does. Like some of my clients, they come to me because getting diagnosed is a very scary thing. And sometimes you stand in the grocery store or at the farmer's market and go, now what do I eat? Like I have no idea what to do.
Yeah.
So how do you help those people when they're first diagnosed? Because some people do want to put in the work and they just need a little guidance.
So one of the things I help people with, I have what's called the master food list. And it's literally just a list of 650 foods. And it's broken down into category. And what I have people do is we look at what they're diagnosed as allergic to or intolerant to. We go through that list, we cross everything off. And then what's left, we look at that list and we say, okay, this is your starting point. Now, for some people, they also have to look at like cross reactivity. And I've got some documents and resources for people that they can use as well to like cross reference those lists and subtract more things from their master list. And then at the end, they're left with a list of things that should be safe to at least try, right? I like to start people on trials with the least likely allergenic foods, right? And so like, for example, when people are looking for a protein, I'll often suggest something like grass-fed, grass-finished bison. It's so rare to find someone allergic to bison unless you're looking at alpha-gal and they've got a red meat allergy, right? Outside of that, it is so rare to find someone who cannot have bison. So if we can get you one clean protein, we can build from that, right? I get people to go to farmers markets and talk to farmers, buy dirty produce. Don't buy the cleanest thing on the shelf because that means now it's been through processing and different things, right? We don't want all of that. We want to make sure that we're getting you the purest form of said food so that we know if you can really have it. And then we just keep building from there. I'll give you an example. Recently, I did a food trial and I passed the food trial with a very specific brand and product, right? And I did the trial for, I want to say like 3 months. Like when I do a trial for certain things, I go all in for a while just to really make sure. And I can safely say like, that's a pass. So then I decided to get a less expensive brand of the same thing, essentially, full on reaction, right? So it's like, and I tried several brands, right? Single ingredients. I reacted to all of them. So it's like, for me, it's one company that I think they have like 3 products that I eat. It's all the same thing, but it's like a derivative of the one thing. But
so it must be how they process it, because it's like when you're talking to people and everyone's like, but why won't you eat that? It's oats or something. And you're like, because oats are gluten-free. But inherently, they're not, because in the process, stuff is introduced to them. So maybe somewhere along the way, the process of the other brands.
It could be. I mean, that's why you look at things like Purity Protocol oats, which are way better than just standard gluten-free and standard organic, right? They go way above and beyond the call of duty. I find that if you fail Purity Protocol oats, then you fall into that group of about 25% of people with celiac disease who can't do oats. And that's usually because of the avian, which is not quite a gluten, but similar enough to gluten that some people still react to it as if it were gluten. But in this case, it was almond. And the company that I started with, it was an organic sprouted almond product. And then I tried just straight almonds. That did not work, from a different company, a reputable brand too, might I say, also organic. And I also tried an almond flour. That did not go over well. And then, but then I have a different almond flour now from a different company, and it's worked. So
that's great.
Yeah, it is great. So it's like, so now I have 2 companies that I can lean into for an almond product. So now I have almond butter, almonds, almond flour. I could buy an almond paste if I'm up for it, but I don't really want it. I don't actually need it. But when you go through this process, and I'm not saying everybody has this process, there are, I would say, 90% of people with food allergy or food intolerance that don't need this process, right? But I'll also say about 70% can have food made on shared equipment, whereas the other 30 cannot. So somewhere between 10 and 30% of people are going to need a process like mine, where it's like you start off with the cleanest, purest, usually most expensive version of the product. Can you actually have the product? Now let's see if you can have other brands. Can we have other brands? Yes, great. No, okay. Now we know that this is all you get. what can we then make with that, right? Because now it's a matter of, well, what can you make with almonds? You can make so much with almonds, right?
Yeah.
And so
I
it's
bake
just,
with them all the time.
yeah,
Almond
like
flour.
you can do a lot of things. So, you know, before my most recent trials, I had 9 safe foods. People hear that and they're like, "How did you survive?" I'm like, "I had cookies, cakes, and ice cream. Like, I survived. I did great.
Hey, that sounds good to
I
me.
did fine." You know, because like I see people and they're like, "I'm allergic to black pepper. There's nothing to eat." And I'm like, "I have 9 safe foods and I have a freezer full." So, like your definition of nothing and my definition of nothing, 2 different things, right? But I'll tell you something really funny. Turns out I still don't like most foods. Like I just don't. Right? Like if you okay, case in point. There's this almond-based bread baguette thing that I buy from this bakery in San Diego, and it works out pretty well for me. And so I decided to make traditional French toast with egg, which I'd never had before. I thought it was the most vile and wicked and most disgusting thing. And I was like, who in their right mind thought this was a good idea? Right. And that's the thing. But if you give me,
Can you have all the things that go into a traditional French toast? Can you have like
so
the
I have like a,
cinnamon
I
and
have a,
roses and all that
I have
other good
faux,
stuff?
I have faux bread. I have eggs now. That's one of my most recent trials. I have a raw sheep's milk and I have nutmeg, right? So I can use those 4 to pull together a traditional-ish French toast. But it was the texture and it was like, what is this? Why are people eating this? Like I don't understand. Like that was my reaction to traditional French toast. And I think it's funny because, you know, one of the gifts that I give the world as I see it is I let people in on what their kids are thinking, right? People don't understand why their kids are rejecting food sometimes. And I'm over here like, I can tell you why. It's disgusting, right? And that's the thing. Like, you know, don't yuck someone else's yum. If you love it, I'm so happy for you. Like, for those of you watching who love French toast, more power to you. I actually thought before eating it myself that French toast was a really cool thing. Like, legit, I thought it was so cool because I'd never eaten it before. And then I ate it. But I can clue you in onto what, you know, children and nonverbal people are thinking, that things that they don't say or, you know, can't tell you yet. It's just because they don't like the texture. They don't like the taste. It's foreign. It's different. It's weird. You know, like, no, thank you. Just give me a piece of toasted bread, you know, a steamed egg, and call it a day. That's all I need. Like the 2
That's not
separate,
bad. That's still
right?
something. You
Yeah.
know, I do feel like with kids, they look at food so differently than we do. And when
Yeah.
you're introducing food to children, it's so different to them. They look at how it feels, how it tastes, because the first thing they do is learn to pick it up with their hands. So they're feeling the food before they're actually eating it.
Yeah. Well, and that's why it's so important that you let babies get messy, right? You've got some parents who are like very anti-mess and they spoon feed their babies everything. And like, I'm not knocking it, right? I get it. I mean, I'm a very
Mhm.
neat person. It sort of creeps me out watching kids get messy. But when we don't allow them to explore, we remove that sensory element. And as they get older, the sensory elements become so foreign that they can't cope with standard food. And it's what we don't want to have happen to them.
There are so many. You teach kids just like I do, and I always find it amusing that the kid walks into class and sees what we're making and they're like, nope, not going to eat it. And then I ask them, my first question is, have you ever had it? Well, no. Why don't you like it? Why don't you want to try it? Well, because my friend doesn't eat it. And it's like, so I always have the rule, if you're not allergic to it, you're going to try at least one bite and then you can say no, thank you. But kids are so different. Do you come across those things?
I mean, I do, and I always encourage parents start with play, right? Start with other
Mhm.
things. Like, don't force them to eat it. Just be like, what's it smell like to you, right? What's it feel like? You know, or one of my favorite things to tell people to do is play tic-tac-toe, like for food exposure. So you use carrots as the hashtag board, and then you would use small fruits and vegetables as the game pieces. So for kids who are super picky, it gets them touching the food, it gets them playing with the food. We're building positive associations and pretty soon they'll get brave enough and actually eat the food, right?
I like that.
I'm really big into like getting kids to a point where they just innately want to try foods, you know, whether it be because we had a tea party or They helped you with the baking and the cooking, or, whatever the case may be. I just know for me, when I was a child, food was like the enemy, right? I hated
Mhm.
food as a kid. It took me so long to eat. I would be forced to eat. It would take me over an hour just to eat like a single meal because food was pain, right? And I think as
Mhm.
a child, I knew that, but couldn't express it. And so what do kids do? They use child logic and they avoid food or do whatever they've got to do to get out of it. I picked apart every meal, like
Oh,
well until probably until I was diagnosed. I mean, I literally would, people would see me eating and they would make fun of me. They would just assume I had OCD, like extreme OCD because of how I ate. It was very, very methodical, very strange. And that, again, that's just child logic that carried over into adulthood of how do I reduce the pain, right? How do I do something about this?
that's
But
horrible to
yeah,
think
it's
that the only thing you could do as a kid is to like pick it apart because it caused you so much pain and you couldn't verbalize that.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I encourage people. Like, if your kid, for example, if they spit out food, don't force them to keep eating it. Like, put it there. If they choose to eat it, great. If they avoid it naturally, great. I've talked to so many people with complex cases like myself. And the one thing that we all have in common is that as children, we hated the taste of most of the foods we later learned we were allergic or intolerant to.
Hmm.
And so many people have this shared experience that I am a firm believer. If a child does not innately want to eat the food, we do not need to force it. There are hundreds of ingredients to choose from. And when the child is old enough to provide fully informed consent, then start messing around with stuff, right? Like, hey, do you want to try licking this? Let's turn it into a lollipop or a popsicle or whatever, right? Like, let's create something cool so that we know that they're not allergic to the food. But this idea that people get hyper fixated on, my kid has to be able to eat these 17 ingredients. Why? Aren't there 17 others? Like, why those if they already don't want it? And we can't know why they don't want it until they can verbalize why they don't want it.
I feel like now there's so many more kids when they sign up for like a cooking class that have so many more food allergies than there used to be. And some of them, every once in a while, I get some kid with an allergy to something I just never thought was possible. But hey, I'm allergic to things most people are like, really? You're allergic to
Yeah.
that? So I never really,
Yeah.
get.
Nothing surprises me anymore. Like, I haven't been surprised in a long time about someone's list.
So what do you do when you teach the kids? I like the idea of putting a game. Maybe I'll try that next time with the 4-year-olds. Let them start playing.
Let's see. When I teach kids, usually, so like my last round of classes were all virtual, and what we do is we have parents let us know in advance, who's allergic to what. I mean, the
Mhm.
recipes are all hyper allergy friendly from the get go, though, so it's rare that we even have to modify someone's recipe cards for them. But in the case that we need to, we do. And then I just teach them how to do stuff. I teach them how to use a kitchen scale because kitchen scales are life. Americans, I feel like as Americans, we got ripped off. We like legit got ripped off. Let me tell you, when you use the metric system for weighing food and for baking, number one, you get precise results. It's awesome. That's one of the biggest issues with gluten free baking. People are like, it didn't come out right. And I'm like, well, were you using cups or did you use the weights? Well, I used cups. Okay, well, how do you know you got the exact measurement? Right. And the thing is something I explained to one of our kids recently, and she was like, whoa, that's crazy. With arrowroot flour, or arrowroot starch, I should say, 30 grams in a recipe is great. 45 grams makes it gummy and gross.
Oh,
The
yeah.
difference between 30 and 45, those 15 grams, is like 10 almonds, right? It's less than an ounce. Okay. How easy is it to add an extra 15 grams if you're using cups and not weights? It's so easy, right?
Yeah, it's very easy,
So
especially if you're like, the kids want to go right into the bag or right into the like canister or whatever
yeah,
you have out.
exactly. So I teach kids how to use the kitchen scale, and we talk about like the science behind it. And depending on how old they are, I kind of water it down a little bit, But we talk about the science behind it all because I find it fascinating. I'm a scientist at heart. I've been since like the 5th grade. I've been fascinated with it all. But the way gluten-free flours work together and why you need more than one, and how the blend makes it better. light, medium, and heavy weights. And then, of course, we talk about eggs and how eggs can do 4 things, and how the recipes, if you build them from the ground up by switching up different things, we're literally replacing each component of the egg, right? And I just try to teach them the why of how it's working so that they can then go and make modifications themselves. And I give them tips like, okay, now let's say you want to make a strawberry version. How would we do that? Or if you wanted to make, a cinnamon version, because not all ingredients play the same. If you blend up strawberries and make a liquid, it will throw off your recipe as compared to taking, say, freeze-dried strawberries or dried strawberries and just folding them in, right? Two totally different results. And so it's just teaching them these little tips and tricks so that they can then go on their free from journey and have awesome food that tastes really good. I think honestly, that's the biggest compliment. I get so many parents who write in and say, I didn't think the food was going to taste that good, because like the parent won't have a food allergy. Like, that food tasted so good. One mom wrote in and said, the kids insisted that we take it to their grandparents' house and the grandparents were blown away. I was like, there you go, right? Everyone can enjoy it, including those who are allergic to stuff.
I always think it's funny is when I go to my grandparents to visit, my grandmother's always like, what am I going to feed you? I need a grocery list. I don't understand. And I'm like, Graham, it's fine. I'm like, I'll go to the store. I'll like make food. And it's so funny that when I cook, she doesn't understand that what I made, she's like, it's good. She thinks it's good, or when I bake. But I always find if you don't tell people that there's stuff missing and they just decide it's good, there's no need to tell them that it's allergy friendly, except for the person that needs to know.
Right. That's what it was like for our bakery. We had, there was a big biotech company that would order from the bakery all the time for their meetings. And I sort of inquired one day, like, do you guys have that many people with food allergies? Like, no, we just really like the way it tastes. Most people here don't need it. And I'm like, you know what? More power to you guys. That's the biggest compliment, because when people who don't need your food tell you things like, I would have never known if you hadn't told me, like, I feel like a magician, like the best kind of magician, who can just like do the thing, and like and like ta-da, and you just come up with this stuff. And I don't know, for me, that's the joy in it. People look at my story and they want to throw me a pity party. I'm like, why? I'm over here having the time of my life, shoving it in the world's face, saying, did you see that cupcake? There was no this, no this, no this, no this, and you can eat it and it tastes good. I'm over here smiling because I think it's so cool. Like, people think that I'm sitting around in misery, and I'm like, no. I'm having a blast. Like, this is great. So, yeah. But that's me.
Maybe one day you'll actually be able to eat some of the stuff you make.
Maybe. But, again, it's funny. I don't think I would. After that French toast experience, I'm like, no, I'm good. It's so funny. I bought a really cool waffle maker for myself. Now that I have enough ingredients for a good waffle. Like, I had waffles before, but I didn't really like them. Like, they were nice every so often, but I could never get them just right for me based on my safe ingredients. And so once I was able to change up the recipe, it was like, wow, the texture is perfect. This is great. Blah, blah, blah. Like, it was pretty cool. And I ate them like twice. And I have a freezer full of waffles right now. And I've not gone back to them. Like, I'm not drawn to the waffle, right? Like, I am drawn to the most basic of foods. Like, I kid you not. I will literally pick up a handful of almonds, put some salt in my hand, and just dip it and eat it. To me, that's all I need, right? So basic. So
if you have the best ingredients possible, which always makes me sad that sometimes the best, like, organic or the healthiest things that are always the most expensive, especially now when parents are always asking me, how do I do this for my kid or for our family on a budget? And I always feel so bad that these are always the most expensive things in the world.
Yeah.
Our food system is like backwards.
It is, because, we have budget tips on the website, and I tell people from the get-go, shop the perimeter of the store, right? There's going to be the most cost-effective things, or even shop a farmer's market. You're going to get even better deals on those perimeter items.
Of course.
But the hard truth that nobody tells, I tell people, but most people won't tell you this. You will pay either with time or money. Pick one. But you're not going to get out of paying for this, whatever it is, whether it be food, lifestyle changes, whatever. You've got to pay for it one way or the other. And a lot of people, some people just want to throw money at the problem. Other people are willing to do the work and do the things. Some people, they want to throw money at the problem, but they can't buy it. They have to make it, right? And then they get upset because they have to invest that time that they don't want to invest. And I mean, at that point, you could hire a personal chef or whatever, but I mean, not a lot of people do. And then they'll just eat boring old food and they'll be like, my food is so bad. My food is so this, it's so that. And I'm like, yeah, because there's no flavor in it. It's funny because I was talking to one of my kids and she's like, your food always tastes better than mine. And I'm like, you're just saying that so I make you food. Go make your own food, right? Well, the other day, we were talking about eggs, and I said something about, she was watching me cook a meal for her and her friends. And she goes, I never season it that way. I'm like, why not? She goes, feels too gourmet that way. Like, I don't think you're supposed to do that every time. I'm like, you need flavor every time. She's like, I think that's why your food tastes better than mine. I'm like, well, yeah, if you're not adding any flavor. I said, and then I told her, though, I said, here's the thing, though, you're going to find about because all the kids have a Rave account and they can log in and look stuff up. I believe in cooking with flavor, right? I'm going to punch you in the face with flavor because one of the biggest complaints from the Free From community is how bland and gross and boring the food is. Why? Because if you're only going to use half a teaspoon of salt in your whole recipe, of course it's going to be bland. You're not pulling out the natural flavors, right? If you're making a cinnamon cake with 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, it's not going to taste of cinnamon, right? You're going to get a hint of cinnamon. I mean, here's the thing. If you're into hyper fine dining where every flavor is delicate, I bet you'd love those recipes. For everybody else, you want to be punched in the face with flavor.
Well, everybody wants food that tastes good. I mean, let's hold that thought, and we have to pay a few bills. So we're going to have messages from one of our sponsors, and we will be right back.
Hi, I'm Liz Teresa. I help women launch and build online businesses they love.
I needed to give my brand a web presence, but I didn't speak tech. Enter Liz Teresa. With lightning speed, she got the essence of my brand. Her guidance notes, her tips were practical and concrete.
She's the #1 person in my life. I'm so happy she came to me.
So thank you, Liz Teresa. I am so excited to keep working with you.
And we are back with Kathlena, the Allergy Chef. We are having so much fun talking about food and flavor and all the amazing things that you can do, even if you have food allergies. Now, you were talking about one of your kids that was saying how her food never tastes the same as when you make it. Now, you have a few kids, and they all have allergies of their own, right?
Correct. So we're like the house of allergies, right? Their dad is macadamia and coconut, which always makes me laugh, sort of, because you've got some people who are like, you can't be allergic to tree nuts and coconut. And I'm like, oh, yeah, you can. And then, of course, you have the people who say you can't be allergic to just one tree nut. And I'm like, oh, yeah, you can. So he's kind of like this walking contradiction, according to so many people. But I'm always trying to tell people no two people are the same. You can be allergic to anything in any combination, right? And so that's the only two things. Now, the downside is that, kid 1 is gluten-free, dairy-free for cognitive function, but he's an adult. He wants to live like an American. He's eating whatever he wants and does his own thing. Mm-hmm. Kid 2 is wheat, dairy, egg, beef, all bovine, and red meats. And so when you can't do dairy, right? Usually in the free from world, they throw coconut at everything. Well, when you've got 2 people in a house where one's coconut and one's dairy, guess what happens? You reinvent every wheel there is. So I've been reinventing wheels for a very long time. And kid 3, we call him Mr. Low No Sugar. He's supposed to have a strict organic diet. Again, he's an adult now, does whatever he wants. He does best gluten-free, dairy-free, refined sugar-free, and he's got to make his own choices. I gotta tell you, that's the hardest thing about watching your kids grow up. It's watching them make bad food choices when you've raised them better. I'm like, you live in a house full of healthy choices and you just went and bought fast food. Not even the decent fast food that I won't complain about, right? You bought the junky stuff. Like, why? Or the kids will walk in with gummy bears. I'm like, I would have bought you organic gummy bears if you had just asked. why would you go buy that? And they were like, well, I had to go to the gas station and gas up my car, and the gummy bears were there. And I'm like, so what? Who cares? Like, that, like, it's like when they go and buy soda, I'm like, there was a soda stream on the countertop right there. You could have made your own soda, and that is the absolute hardest thing for me personally. It's when they get all that freedom and they've got their own money and they've got their own car, and you're just sitting there going, one of these days you're going to come back to, the way I raised you and everything will be great again. But that's just the way it is. And
well,
then
I guess if that's their only form of teenage rebellion, it could be worse, right?
I remind myself of that at times. Like, you know what? I'm not raising drug dealers, so it's okay. Like,
they're not tattooed. They don't have 10,000 piercings in places that nobody ever should, or they're not, out until all hours of the night or anything. So, mostly you got pretty good kids, right?
Yeah. I mean, I like to think that I don't want the bar so low that it's like too low, but like, I guess to me as an overachiever, I don't necessarily want my kids to be overachievers like I am, but I want them to at least chase something, right? Like, if you want to be a garbage man, be the best garbage man you can be. Like, rethink revolutionary ways to deal with garbage. Like, how can we recycle it better? How can we do better? Like, to me, constant growth and striving for change, I think that's important, right? I find that this next generation of people, like, they just don't have the same gumption. Like, they sort of just want to sit around. And I've talked with some teachers who've taught like middle school, for example, for quite a while. And they're like, yeah, the kids of old were really hard workers. The kids of today, one thing I noticed they said a lot of is that there's a lot more kindness in children these days. But at the same time, they just want you to give them the answer. They're not willing to put in the work. Like, it's a different kid. They don't have that same drive. And I see that even in my own kids, where they were raised with a really good example of gumption and get up and go. And so it's like, it's the influence of the world. And it's like, what am I going to do? They're adults. They can make their own decisions now.
Well, they're living in very unique times where, let's face it, like the last few years have not been normal for anybody.
No,
So
well, and it hasn't been kind to our youth, right?
Through.
Our youth have suffered greatly, and then of course we look at the education component and how much we've lost in terms of like footing educationally, and it's awful. Like, I am scared for the next generation. I told some friends when this whole thing started, I said, you watch, we're going to see a ripple where every kid, if they were not at the age of 18 by 2020, we're going to see it for the next 20 years in college applications, job applications, every application in life, where we're going to have like these peaks of, progress or whatever you want to call it. And then every group is going to just have these drop off points, and it's all going to track back to 2020. Right.
I'm hoping I'm going to be positive, which isn't really my thing. I'm a little more sarcastic and a little more pessimistic than usual. But I would say that I'm hoping the next generation will see what's happening and maybe want to find solutions for the things that are going on.
I hope that they have their leaders, right? I feel like the next generation is missing their next leaders, and they need them, right? They need people to start leading them forward, because they're only willing to listen to older adults for so long before it's like, I know these things, and they need to see their own peers standing up and being leaders. And I think that's really what we need a good dose of, is youthful strength, like good morals, good leadership, good heads on their shoulders, and just leading their peers forward, because they're going to be the next wave of leaders at some point, right? When you and I are too old to do too much, they're going to be the leaders. And are we going to be happy with their choices? I don't know yet. I want to have hope. And at the same time, I see some of the stuff these kids are doing, and I'm like,
well, let's face it. I think it's part of getting older that we're always like the next generation. We're looking at them going, really? Or like they do something that we did when we were teenagers, and we're sitting there going, what were we thinking? Why did we do this?
Yeah. When you're always going to have that. I just feel like it runs a little deeper. And I've talked to some people about it, and we all tend to agree that if you were like basically in middle school, by the time the internet was in most homes, you generally have a better head on your shoulder. Like you have a bigger drive, more gumption, more a lot of things, more wisdom, just more things, right? You're more adaptable. When we look at kids who were born with the internet, who were born with tablets, born with phones, born with this digital silver spoon in their mouth, it's a different person. They really are inherently different than generations previous. And it is too soon to know what these kids will become, but it'll be interesting to watch,
Let's hope they'll solve some food problems we got, and maybe we'll hopefully they can help us with that going forward. Now, you help with so many allergens, and your kids have allergies, and you're teaching people. What are like the top 8 allergens that people are mostly allergic to?
So top 8, which will soon become top 9 here in the United States, that's going to be wheat, dairy, egg, soy, peanuts, tree nuts, fish, shellfish, and sesame. So sesame has not been fully integrated as number 9 yet, but it's the deadline is approaching. And then per the FDA, coconut is labeled as a tree nut, even though botanically it is not a tree nut. So you get a lot of arguments within the free from community where some people are like, it's top 8 free, but there's coconut in the recipe. And I'm like, legally it's not top 8 free, but I'm not going to pick a fight with you today. And then it's also important to note that wheat is a top 8 allergen. Gluten is not. People often mistakenly say gluten and wheat are the same thing. They actually are not. So gluten is found in wheat, rye, and barley. And then, of course, for some people, oat because of avian, depending on whether or not you have to avoid it. So you can actually have a product made from rye that is top 8 allergy free because it's wheat free, but it does contain gluten. So 2 different things there. I always like to make sure people know there's a difference.
And we're also not saying that because you're allergic to things, you can't have good food, or that, this will be your experience either. We're just sharing the knowledge that we all know.
Yeah. Like, to me, I think the only people that are really in a tough spot, it's really people who are tube fed. I know a lot of tube fed people, and their options are basically like, it's your formula and that's it, right? Outside of the tube fed, I feel like I can make some magic happen for people, That's my superpower. I don't know what to do with that superpower sometimes. I mean, it's not like I can fly, but I can make a mean bowl of something, right?
Oh, flying might be fun.
I know. See, like if I could pick my own superpower, I would not pick this. I would pick something else. Like, this is cool, but I mean, flying would be so much cooler. Can I just say that out loud?
Yeah. It'd be probably a lot less expensive too.
Well, especially too, like if you could fly at a decent speed too. Like if you got the power of flight, but it was slow flight, I'd feel like, what was the point, But if like I can like fly, like, oh man, that'd be so radical. Think of all the fun you could have,
Yeah, actually, that would be entertaining. Now, you have a recipe that you may be able to demo for us today, or no? Do you not have that?
Let's see. As long as I can putter around the kitchen a little bit, I would be happy to show you guys this recipe. It is a gluten-free, vegan, top 8 allergy-free, fluffy pancake. And so it's pretty easy to make. We need milk, apple cider vinegar, and vanilla. And the recipe for this is on Raise, and it's a free recipe. If you go to free resources, free recipes, and scroll through them, you'll find these fluffy pancakes. We need 320 grams of flour, a sweetener, baking powder, salt, and baking soda. So I am going to grab those ingredients. In fact, I bet if I holler real loud, I could get an assistant in here to help me grab some ingredients. So here I've already got the milk measured, and I've got milk with vinegar here already ready to go. And I've got a kid off to the side who's going to grab me some sorghum, arrowroot, millet, and oat flour. And I'm going to grab a mixing bowl for us. Now, one of the biggest tips I can give you when you're free from, invest in the tools that you need. Do not be afraid to buy several mixing bowls. Like if you do a lot of mixing, I think you should have a lot of mixing bowls. We have more than, like, I'm almost embarrassed by how many that we have, but we have a lot of them. Same thing with measuring spoons. I wish I were joking when I said I probably have 100 measuring spoons. I'm not joking. They all sit in this little drawer, and you have every size, multiple versions of every size, so that every time you go to cook, you have everything you need, right? I feel like that's half the battle sometimes. And then, of course,
Finding clean things.
yeah, sorghum, millet, oat. So I've got our kitchen scale here. I'm just going to pop that on.
Do you have a brand you like more than others as far as
The kitchen scales, I'd have to send you the link to the one that I like right now. There's two that I like. One of them is $10. One of them is $20. And they both work great. So the first thing we're going to do is add in our sorghum flour. We're going to use 150 grams of this. Okay. Remember, I share recipes in grams because I can get you a precise measurement, and it makes your life so much easier. And then we are going to add in 50 grams of millet flour. Now, here's a really fun fact for you. Millet flour tastes corny. So for those who are allergic to corn, we actually have this really cool recipe on our website for what's called millet muffins. And it's like a fake version of cornbread. And it tastes corny because of the millet flour, which is really cool. Like, it's such a random tidbit for anybody watching. I'd also tell you to invest in containers like these. This is the OXO brand. Love the OXO brand. I don't know why. Just really love it. But for each flour that you use quite often, you'll get a large container. And then inside of each container, we actually have a set of measuring spoons, or measuring cups, I should say, so that you never have to do the dishes. And then if you go to the web restaurant store, I think it's called like Webstraunt. It's set, like, they type it out really weird. But you can get measuring cups and measuring spoons for a much more affordable price. So like if you outfit your kitchen with all these types of containers for flours and things, go to Web Restaurant and then get your measuring cups from them. And you can get them for like $5 for a set, right? So you can have a set here and a set here and a set here and a set here and not go bankrupt doing it. Next up,
go ahead, keep going.
Oh, next up, we've got our oat flour. Now, the thing about oat flour is, for those who can't have it, you will want to use tiger nut flour. Tiger nut is not a true tree nut. It is a poorly named root tuber vegetable, and it is a 1-to-1 exchange for oat flour, but not rolled oats, right? Rolled oats is its own thing. We are going to use 90 grams of oat flour today.
If you are in a pinch, though, and you have oats that you can eat, you can pulverize them if you have a good blender or food processor into oat flour.
Correct. You can. The brand that we like for oat flour, I usually use GF Harvest. They're Purity Protocol oats, and they're organic. The other brand that we like is Zigo. Zigo Foods makes a lot of great products, and they both operate out of top 8 free facilities. Last thing we're going to add is 30 grams of arrowroot. And that's our dry ingredients done. Actually, that's not our dry ingredients. I'm almost done. Almost done. Next up, we're going to add a sweetener of choice. So I'm going to be using maple sugar because that's what we like using. And it's an unrefined sweetener, so it's not like cane sugar.
It's also great this time of year, maple sugar. And we're big, I mean, in New England, like the maple season and the sugar shacks are like a huge deal around here.
That's so cool. Like, do you guys drink the sap straight, or does it have to be processed before you guys?
You can go, they have the sugaring season, like you can go to the shacks and like watch it become from the tree. Like you can get it. It's pure and it's like unprocessed as possible. Like you see the whole thing. And sometimes they do like special breakfasts or dinners or stuff with all of it, and you can get maple sugar and everything. It's a really cool thing.
Have you ever done it? The sugar from the tree?
Yeah, I've gone and I see it. They'll let
Tell
you
me
taste
everything. What's it taste like? I gotta know.
sweet. I mean, it does have that mapley, caramely taste, but depending on the tree and how many years it is, or like what the weather is, that every maple syrup has like a slightly different thing. But the thing is it's so pure. Like we get it from like local purveyors, just like you would get local honey. Like there's nothing like it.
That is the coolest thing ever to me. Like that's so cool. All right,
And
so
then
I'm adding our baking powder. And I'm going to have my assistant grab me the dairy-free butter from the fridge because
do you have a particular brand you like for dairy-free butter? Because I have nothing I like.
So we get ours wholesale, and it's a 30-pound box so that it's sulfate free. Yeah, most people don't buy it. For those of you not getting wholesale, I mean, Earth Balance is a pretty good brand. We have not. Can you take the lid off for me? We have not used a lot of other brands just because for so long I've developed recipes that are like, tree nut free and this free and that free, because a lot of them are nut based. So I think it just really depends on what your needs are,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you're not eating it straight, they're all interchangeable in terms of like baking cookies, cooking on your stovetop. But if you're spreading it on toast, I think that's when you're going to see the biggest, like, pronounced difference in taste and texture and all that sort of stuff. And that's where I think most people will want something different. Oh, great assistant. Can I have baking soda, please? Great
assistant. We have about 2 minutes or so. So
great assistant. We only have 2 minutes or so. All right. So here I've got my large pan, and I'm going to get this on the stovetop heating up. That way, as soon as our batter is ready, we can make pancake. So I'm just going to turn that up real high so that our pan heats up quickly. Now, the trick to this recipe, we call this our ultimate fluffy recipe because a lot of people sort of miss that fluff and all their recipes are super dense. The biggest trick that I can share with you is that you mix it by hand. That is the big secret here. We are not going to hook this up to the mixing bowl. What we're going to do is we're going to hold our wire whisk in our hand, and we're just going to manually whisk this up just like this. And then what we're going to do is take our milk and vinegar mix and pour it right in.
Perfect.
And earlier, before we hopped on, we mixed up the flax and water. And that's essentially going to be the binding part of an egg and the moistening part of an egg. So we're going to pop that right in, just like that. And then I'm going to add our vanilla, which is over here.
Is that paste or is that?
So this is organic vanilla extract. It's one of the very few corn-free brands available on the market. What a lot of people don't know is that corn is used as a spray to help dry the vanilla beans. So pretty much the world's supply of vanilla beans are contaminated with corn right off the bat. So any product you try to buy that says it has vanilla in it, if you have a corn allergy, there's a good chance you can't eat it.
Oh, that's disappointing.
So we're just going to mix this by hand. And you can see we've got this great bubbly, rise, fluffy.
I'm going to have to stop you right there for a second. I want to thank Kathlena, the Allergy Chef, for joining us today. She is going to keep going, and we will send you a picture and put it on Instagram tonight so that you guys can all see the results of this. Thank you all for joining us for our 1-year anniversary, and I am so happy that you all joined me.